Hey guys, I'm Elegant and welcome to another weekly Pokevlog. So, someone last week on my last week's Pokevlog commented asking me to talk about pseudo-legendaries, and that wasn't really a whole topic I could talk about. That was sort of a small feature of Pokemon that wouldn't really take up a whole episode of a Pokevlog. So I branched off a few ideas and I thought of what I could talk about, and the things I thought of was that I could talk about, I suppose, the typical things in Pokemon games that they've done every generation, and therefore what we can expect for future games like the 6th generation and maybe even the Ruby Sapphire remake people are hoping for. So yeah, in every game there's always a typical sort of things that they usually have. For example, there's always the Caterpie. So for example, there's Pokemon like Caterpie and Weedle, basically the bug types you can get at the start that evolve pretty soon. And there's also the Rattatas, so things like Bidoof in the later games and Zigzagoons, basically the weak normal type that has the 1 evolution. So there's that. I think that's in every single game. Yeah, because you've got for the 1st generation you have Rattatas, of course. 2nd generation you have the Sentret. 3rd generation you have Zigzagoon. 4th generation you have Bidoof, and 5th generation you have Patrat. So for every generation that's stayed around, and you've also have the Pikachu Pokemon, so the sort of the squirrely, ratty sort of electric type. So Pikachu, Pachirisu, Emolga, all Pokemon like that. So yeah, and so there's also like the fossils and the starters and everything else. There's always these trends in Pokemon they tend to implement in the games, and also, for example, in this sort of the areas, and I don't know what to call it, but there's always an early on forest, and there's always some sort of desert, and well, there was a desert from the 2nd generation onwards, 3rd generation onwards, sorry, because 1st and 2nd hadn't had that implemented, and it was only implemented afterwards. So so yeah, there's always some sort of desert-like area you can go to. So yeah, that makes me think that we're going to have some of these similar trends in the next games we get. If it's the 6th generation, there's new Pokemon made, well, I'm pretty sure we're going to be getting the sort of the weak bug type, the normal type at the start, the electric type, the Geodude, the rock defensive type, and the fossil Pokemon. Pretty much the same starters, maybe with some sort of dual types when they evolve, but yeah, I assume that's what we're going to be getting, so that's what we can expect. But there's also another thing, which I did mention at the start of this episode, that they usually have. There's always actually been a pseudo-legendary in each generation. Now, there was only one generation that's had more than one pseudo-legendary, and that was the 3rd generation, which had Salamence and Metagross. So every other generation had one. So let me go through all the pseudo-legendaries so you know what they are. The 1st generation was Dragonite, the 2nd generation was Tyranitar, the 3rd generation was, as I said, the Metagross and Salamence, the 4th generation was Garchomp, and the 5th generation is the Hydreigon. There's a lot of other ambiguous ones, but they don't fit to the rules of being a pseudo-legendary. So basically what a pseudo-legendary is it has 3 evolutionary stages. Its final evolution has 600 base power, 600 base stats overall at level 50. I think it's level 50, but anyway, the base stats all add up to 600. And you have to have a dual type. So basically, the kind of trick you into thinking they're legendaries, but they're not quite legendaries. Because of the power, it's kind of fake legendaries, that's what the name means. And a lot of people think like Lucario and Flygon, Pokemon like them, are pseudo-legendaries themselves, but they're not. They don't fit to one of them rules, I suppose. And yeah, so there are those 6 so far. So I'm assuming we can expect another one, or at least one more in the next generation. But as you notice them, you might realise there's a lot less legendaries than you might think if you're not familiar with the if you're not too familiar with them. There really are. There's 6 for the 5 generations, which is, I suppose, quite a little amount, since there's been probably in this in Black and White and Black and White 2, there's probably been 6 legendaries in just one generation, which was kind of crazy compared to just being like one pseudo-legendary. So I think maybe there should be more pseudo-legendaries in future. That was my idea, but like I will elaborate on that, my reasons why, in just a second, or after I go through the next bit. So yeah, so there's only currently the 3rd generation that has more than one, which only has 2, so it's not a big step. But Yeah, there's a lot of legendaries. Like I said, there's I don't know how many there is in Black and White and Black and White 2, but I did say there's probably almost definitely over 6, including the different forms. But I think there's a lot of sort of legendary Pokemon for each of the games, and I think, well, our legendaries are meant to be based after something like Kyogre was the ruler of the sea, like Groudon was ruler of the land. You got Dialga, the ruler of time, and Palkia, the ruler of space. So there's just so many, and it's starting to run out. They're starting to dry up with ideas of what the legendaries can be rulers of, and they're just putting so many legendaries into the game. So what I was thinking is that maybe they should start, rather than making a bunch of legendaries in each game, maybe just make 2 main legendaries, which they usually do, put them on the covers, 1 for each. Or if they don't decide not to make 2 games from this next generation, which would be a big sort of change, then maybe just make 1 or maximum 3 or 4, I would say. Maybe you can have some other minor ones, but I would say any sort of legendary Pokemon you want to put in, I would make it a pseudo-legendary, because what pseudo-legendaries are, the regular Pokemon just with legendary power. They don't actually have power over the sea or land, so it's just a legendary that doesn't have power over anything, which Pokemon definitely should implement into the games more, because they're just getting too many legendaries, way too many legendaries, and the pseudo-legendaries quite down in the numbers. So that was my idea anyway. And other things that have been like usual and usually in the Pokemon games, there's always like a Colosseum style game to go with the games. Since Colosseum had been released, of course, XD Gale of Darkness, Pokemon Colosseum, we had Pokemon Battle Revolution. So basically a console game, not a handheld console, just a regular console game to go with the games. And we haven't had that for the 5th generation, which was quite strange. And maybe we can hope for that, as maybe downloadable content for the Wii. That would make sense. Or pretty sure there's a new Wii U or Wii 3D or something coming out. I'm not too with it with the Wii, but I know there's some sort of newish Wii. So maybe they're waiting to actually get the new Wii to release that, because I know they like making things on new platforms that aren't the main typical straight series Pokemon games. Pokemon tend to like to use their other side games to go on the newer platforms. So maybe they're waiting for that, and they make an early release for that. Downloadable content would also be a good idea. So I just wanted to talk about 3DS. A lot of people had hype about how the game will be on 3DS. A lot of people are expecting it to be, because a lot of people were surprised that Pokemon Black and White 2 wasn't on 3DS, but personally I'm not, because well, the Pokemon generations, they've not really split the generations into different platforms, and I think it would be silly if they did, because I don't know, it's just something that they shouldn't do, because generations should have a connection to each other, and if they just completely get rid of that connection by making on 2 platforms, make it kind of difficult to connect, and you'd be able to have all the generations together into one console, then I would think that would sort of defeat the point of just generations, because the generations move with the generations of gaming. I don't know. That's how I see it anyway. And yeah, so a lot of people think the 6th generation would be on a 3DS, which it would make sense, because Pokemon have always made the next generation. Like basically what they've done is they've always had once the next console's out, they've always had a generation continue on while this new console has been out, and they've always been fashionably late, I suppose, to actually bring the next generation onto that console. So for example, before they made Emerald and I think Fire Red and Leaf Green, I'm not sure which came first, but they had the DS out, but they decided to keep all of those games onto the Game Boy Advance. I don't think the DS was actually out when Ruby and Sapphire were made, but they wanted to keep it on the Game Boy Advance series. And then once the DS had been out for a while, they released Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. And so yeah, it would make sense for them to wait a little bit in the 5th generation, wait till the 6th generation to move on to 3DS basically. And I think I said this before, but I think that the 3DS isn't a bigger step. The DSi to the 3DS isn't as big of a step as the Game Boy Advance to the DS was, because really the only advancement is the 3D. Obviously, there's in the title screen, there's much more you can do, and you get all the different downloadable content, but essentially it's still the same, and it's not a different sort of style. You know, if you know the DS, you know the 3DS. Basically, I mean, yeah, there's a few things you have to get used to, and it is 3D as well, but I don't think it's a huge step. So maybe they will make 3D games and non-3D games, because that would maximise their profit as well. Although I assume they're probably being pressured by Nintendo to make a 3DS game, because that'll bring a lot of income to the 3DS. But yeah, there's always been another feature that is usual to Pokemon games is this typical features of each Pokemon type. So basically, water Pokemon have always tended to have more HP than the other Pokemon, and like Psychic Pokemon always tend to have a higher special attack, and Electric Pokemon tend to have higher speed, and Rock and Ground type Pokemon tend to have higher defenses. Fire type Pokemon are a little bit ambiguous, either attack or special attack, but one of the two. And I think the majority actually has physical attack. But yeah, you get what I'm trying to say. There's always been typical features of Pokemon, as well as being typical type combinations. For example, there's a lot of ground rock type Pokemon and bug poison type Pokemon, poison grass type Pokemon. There's all those sorts of types in Pokemon, and there's a lot of untouched territory there. There's been a lot. If you think about it, there's a lot of type combinations that Pokemon hasn't gone into, like Psychic, Electric, Rock. That actually might be one. I don't think it is though. Electric, Rock, yeah. Water Dragon. I don't think there's a Water Dragon type, but yeah, you get what I'm trying to say there. There's a lot of type combinations that haven't been used because they weren't generally been thought to go together, especially with their typical features and typical stats. They wouldn't go together. What I think they should do, because there's getting quite a stack up of Pokemon types that have the same type and things like that. I think Pokemon should change it up a little bit, and in the next generation maybe have a different combinations of types, and I think they might actually do this because they did that with a couple of Pokemon from Generation 5. For example, Stunfisk has the ground electric type, which is kind of weird. A lot of people, it's just an odd kind of typing. You wouldn't expect that. I mean, that was really an odd direction to go in, because I know there's less bizarre type combinations than that. So yeah, I think they should do that and maybe change up the stats a little bit and have maybe a water type with more physical attack and less HP. I don't know, because I think that would make the game much more interesting. Competitive battle will be much more different, and you know, I would expect them to stick to what Pokemon usually is, and stick to, if they make any new Pokemon, stick to the really type combinations and the typical features. Although I do expect them to have maybe at least a couple of bizarre and odd typings of Pokemon, especially maybe the starters. I'm thinking maybe they're going to make the starters like Final Evolution to have a little bit of an odd typing, but I'm not quite sure. I really can't say anything about that. But yeah, there's, I suppose, the typical things in the main series Pokemon games and the new generations is what I'm trying to say. There's also remakes that I did say I was going to talk about, so I will do. So remakes, it's always usually the same as the original games, just a bit vamped up and using the same sort of styles as that generation. So, for example, Fire Red, Leaf Green was pretty much like the original Red and Green games, or the Red and Blue games, whichever way you want to look at it. It had pretty much the same layout, but it had additional areas for one, like the Sevi Islands, and also it had all the vamped up graphics, like I said, and the sort of gyms and the sort of style animation was quite similar to in Emerald, Ruby and Sapphire. So if they do make a Ruby Sapphire remake, I'll expect it to look quite a lot like Pokemon Black and White and Pokemon Black and White 2. Maybe a little bit different, of course, because they can't make it exactly the same. And I would expect it to maybe have the World Tournament, or at least something to do with Black and White that it's similar. Even though they are very far apart, so maybe not the World Tournament. That might have been a little bit too ambitious to say. But I think it's going to, if they do make Ruby Sapphire remix, it will definitely help the game to have more at the end and much more you can do. And I expect that from them anyway. But anyway, we're done with the information that I've really got to say. So let's move on to the question of the week. So I did struggle coming up with a question of the week this week because I wasn't sure what to say. But you know, I thought that maybe I could ask you, would you guys want the game to carry on with the typical features of having the like Caterpie Pokemon bug type and the similar starters, or would you want them to be ambitious and change up the game, change up the pace, and maybe even like I said in my Ruby Sapphire ideas, maybe you want to make the concentration of the game move on to something else and not have gym battles. Also have the option to make Pokemon contests or Pokemon theatre or something. Do you guys want them to change everything up? I don't know, but my personal opinion on it is that I think they should definitely change it up. But I think they should also keep the option to maybe keep it the same. So maybe one game have the extravagant like Pokemon and things and the extravagant gameplay that isn't typical to Pokemon. The other game have things more a little bit typical, and that would also help the separation of the exclusive Pokemon. Like for one game you can have the exclusive bizarre Pokemon, and the other game you can have the exclusive Pokemon that are sort of typical to Pokemon. So yeah, next week I just want to put this out to you guys. I'm actually going to be doing a Ruby Sapphire update, a remake update, and I've already done one, but I've been coming up with some more ideas, and I've kind of been wanting to share them and talk about them. So next week, yeah, look forward to a Ruby Sapphire remake talk then. And yeah, so I will see you then. Thanks for watching.